Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic, funny love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. The organ's triumphant chords filled St. Patrick's Cathedral, their echoes bouncing off the towering stained glass windows that bathed the pews in a kaleidoscope of light. The air was thick with the scent of white roses and polished wood, and the murmurs of 200 guests, New York's elite in their tailored suits and shimmering gowns, created a soft hum beneath the music. At the heart of it all, Elena Brooks sat in her wheelchair at the altar, her ivory gown cascading over the polished chrome of her chair like a waterfall. Her hands, adorned with delicate lace gloves, rested calmly in her lap, but her heart raced beneath the embroidered bodice. Today was supposed to be the day she became Mrs. Jason Reynolds. Elena's dark brown eyes sparkled with nervous anticipation as she glanced at the man standing beside her. Jason Reynolds, with his chiseled jaw and perfectly styled blonde hair, looked every bit the part of a fairy tale groom in his tailored black tuxedo. His smile, however, was strained, his gaze darting to the crowd rather than meeting hers. Elena pushed the thought aside. Weddings were nerve-wracking for everyone, she told herself. She adjusted the veil pinned to her chestnut curls, her fingers brushing the pearl comb her mother had worn decades ago. This was her moment, a dream she'd clung to despite the accident that had taken her ability to walk at age 10. She'd fought for this, for love, for a future, for a day when her disability wouldn't define her. The priest, a kindly man with silver hair, cleared his throat, signaling the start of the vows. The organ faded and a hush fell over the cathedral. Elena's best friend Clara, seated in the front row, gave her an encouraging nod, her eyes misty with pride. Elena smiled back, drawing strength from the familiar face. Clara had been there through every physical therapy session, every tearful night, every milestone. She'd helped Elena believe she deserved this happiness. "Jason," the priest began, his voice warm but firm, "do you take Elena to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" The question hung in the air. Elena turned to Jason, her lips parting in a hopeful smile. But Jason didn't speak. His jaw tightened, and his hands clasped in front of him twitched. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a gust of wind through dry leaves. Elena's smile faltered, her pulse quickening. "Jason?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He finally looked at her, but there was no warmth in his blue eyes, only a cold, distant resolve. "I'm sorry, Elena," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I can't do this." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her breath caught, and her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. "What?" she managed, her voice trembling. Jason turned to face the crowd, his posture stiff, as if addressing a boardroom rather than a wedding. "I can't marry her," he announced, his voice carrying a cruel clarity. "I thought I could, but I can't. Not with this." He gestured vaguely toward her wheelchair, his lip curling in a way that made Elena's stomach churn. Gasps erupted from the pews. Clara shot to her feet, her face a mask of fury, but Elena barely noticed. The world seemed to shrink, the vibrant colors of the cathedral fading to gray. Her disability, something she'd fought to embrace, something she'd never hidden from Jason, was now a weapon turned against her. She wanted to scream, to demand why he'd waited until this moment, but her throat felt sealed shut. "Jason, please," she said, her voice cracking. "Talk to me. We can—" "There's nothing to talk about," he cut her off, his tone sharp. "I'm sorry, Elena. I can't live my life like this. I can't be tied to someone who'll always need help." He stepped back, adjusting his cufflinks as if dismissing a business deal gone sour. "It's over." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock, pity, and morbid curiosity. Elena felt their eyes on her, hundreds of gazes piercing through her carefully constructed armor. She'd spent years building her confidence, proving she was more than her wheelchair, graduating top of her class, working as a freelance graphic designer, living independently. But now in this moment, she was reduced to the one thing Jason saw, a burden. Tears stung her eyes, but Elena refused to let them fall. She straightened in her chair, her chin lifting despite the ache in her chest. "You could have told me before," she said, her voice low but steady. "You didn't have to do this here." Jason didn't respond. He turned and strode down the aisle, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted for him, some shaking their heads, others whispering behind their hands. Elena watched him go, her heart splintering with every step. The priest reached out, his hand hovering awkwardly above her shoulder, but she shook her head. She didn't want pity, not from him, not from anyone. Clara rushed to her side, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "Elena, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "That coward doesn't deserve you." Elena forced a small smile, though it felt like a lie. "I'll be okay," she said, more to herself than to Clara. But the words tasted hollow. She glanced at the crowd, their faces a blur of sympathy and discomfort. Some were already gathering their purses, eager to escape the awkwardness. Others lingered, drawn to the drama unfolding before them. She wanted to wheel herself out, to disappear into the city and pretend this day had never happened. But her hands trembled too much to grip the wheels properly, and the weight of everyone's stares pinned her in place. This was supposed to be her fairy tale, her triumph over a world that often overlooked people like her. Instead, it was a public humiliation, a wound laid bare for all to see. The organist, unsure what to do, began playing a soft, aimless melody as if trying to fill the void. The priest murmured something about grace and forgiveness, but Elena barely heard him. Her mind replayed Jason's words. Someone who will always need help, each syllable carving deeper into her soul. She told him everything, shared her fears, her dreams, her vulnerabilities, and he'd use them to break her. As she sat there fighting to hold herself together, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision. A man stepped forward from the back of the cathedral, his presence commanding despite the chaos. He was tall, with sharp features and jet black hair, his tailored suit as dark as the storm in his gray eyes. Whispers followed him, a different kind than before, tinged with fear, recognition, awe. Elena didn't know him, but something about his purposeful stride made her breath catch. He stopped at the foot of the altar, his gaze locking onto hers. The crowd fell silent, the air charged with anticipation. Even Clara froze, her hand tightening on Elena's arm. The man's voice, low and resonant, cut through the tension like a blade. "If he won't marry you," he said, each word deliberate, "I will." Elena's heart stuttered. She stared at him, her mind scrambling to make sense of his words. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs, but the man didn't flinch. His eyes held hers, unyielding, as if daring her to trust him. And in that moment, amidst the wreckage of her dreams, Elena felt something shift, a spark of hope, fragile but undeniable. The cathedral's silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the organ, its notes faltering as the organist hesitated. Elena Brooks sat frozen in her wheelchair at the altar, her ivory gown pooling around her like a wilted dream. Jason's rejection still echoed in her mind. "I can't be tied to someone who'll always need help." Each word a shard of glass in her heart. The crowd's whispers buzzed like a swarm of bees, their pity and curiosity pressing against her like a physical weight. Clara, her best friend, gripped her arm, her face a mix of outrage and concern, but Elena barely felt it. Her world had collapsed in the span of minutes, and all she could do was hold herself together, her chin high despite the tears threatening to spill. Then a voice cut through the chaos, low and commanding, like thunder rolling over a quiet sea. "If he won't marry you, I will." Elena's breath caught. Her eyes snapped to the man who had spoken, standing at the foot of the altar. He was tall, his presence dominating the vast cathedral, despite the hundreds of eyes now fixed on him. His jet-black hair was swept back, framing a face carved from sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see through her. His tailored black suit clung to his broad shoulders, exuding wealth and power. But there was something else in his demeanor, something dangerous, like a predator who had just stepped into the light. The crowd's murmurs shifted, tinged with recognition and unease. Whoever this man was, he was no ordinary guest. Clara leaned closer, her voice a frantic whisper. Elena, who is that? I... I don't know, Elena stammered, her gaze locked on the stranger. Her heart pounded, a mix of fear and confusion swirling in her chest. She'd never seen him before, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that felt strangely familiar, as if he knew her in a way she couldn't comprehend. The man took a step closer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted instinctively, some guests shrinking back as if his presence alone demanded space. The priest, still standing behind Elena, cleared his throat nervously, clutching his Bible like a shield. Sir, this is highly irregular. Irregular? The man's voice was calm but edged with steel, silencing the priest. He turned his attention back to Elena, his gaze softening just enough to make her pulse skip. What's irregular is letting a woman like her be humiliated by a coward who doesn't deserve her. Gasps rippled through the pews. A few guests exchanged glances, some scandalized, others intrigued. Elena's cheeks burned, torn between embarrassment and a strange flicker of gratitude. No one had ever spoken for her like that, with such unyielding conviction. But who was he, and why was he doing this? Sir, Elena said, her voice trembling but firm, I don't know you. Why are you doing this? He climbed the altar steps, stopping just a few feet from her. Up close, she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, a jagged line that hinted at a past she couldn't imagine. His eyes held hers unblinking, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter, meant only for her. Trust me, Elena. I owe your father everything. Let me protect you from this. Her father? The mention of Thomas Brooks sent a jolt through her. Memories of her father, his warm smile, his gentle hands bandaging her skinned knees before the accident, changed everything, flooded her mind. He'd been gone for 5 years, taken by a sudden heart attack, but his absence still ached. How did this man know him? And what did he mean by protect? Before she could respond, a woman in the front row, Jason's mother, Margaret Reynolds, in a gaudy emerald dress, stood abruptly. This is absurd, she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. Who do you think you are, disrupting a private matter? My son made his choice, and this girl, she gestured at Elena, her lip curling, is not our concern. The man turned, his expression darkening. Your son made a spectacle of his cowardice, he said, his words slicing through the air. And I am Damon Blackwood. Perhaps you've heard of me? The name sent a shockwave through the crowd. Elena caught fragments of their whispers. Blackwood Enterprises, ruthless, dangerous. Even Clara's grip tightened, her eyes widening. Damon Blackwood. The name stirred something in Elena's memory, a headline she'd glimpsed about a reclusive billionaire whose deals were as feared as his temper. Why was someone like him here, at her wedding? Margaret paled but held her ground. This is none of your business, Mr. Blackwood. It is now, Damon replied, his tone final. He turned back to Elena, ignoring the crowd as if they no longer existed. Elena, you don't deserve this shame. Marry me, right here, right now. Let me give you the dignity that man stole from you. The cathedral seemed to spin. Elena's hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, her mind racing. Marry him? A stranger? It was madness. She'd just been abandoned at the altar, her heart still bleeding from Jason's betrayal. Yet there was something in Damon's eyes, something beyond pity or obligation. It was resolve, fierce and unshakable, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Her voice faltered. She glanced at Clara, whose expression was a mix of worry and cautious encouragement. The crowd watched, breathless, some leaning forward in their seats. Elena's thoughts churned. She didn't know this man, didn't understand his connection to her father, or why he'd risk his reputation for her. But the alternative was unbearable. To wheel away from this altar alone, branded by Jason's rejection, the whispers following her for years. She'd fought too hard to let that define her. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why now? Damon knelt before her, bringing his face level with hers. The gesture was so unexpected that Elena's breath hitched. Because I made a promise, he said softly, his words carrying a weight she couldn't fully grasp. Your father saved my life when I had nothing. He asked me to look after you if he couldn't. I've watched from a distance, Elena, making sure you were safe. Today, I failed you by letting this happen. Let me make it right." His words pierced her, stirring a mix of grief and curiosity. Her father had never mentioned Damon, yet the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. She searched his face, looking for a lie, but found only truth, or at least a truth he believed. The crowd's murmurs faded to a distant hum. For the first time since Jason's betrayal, Elena felt seen, not as a woman in a wheelchair, but as someone worthy of protection. "I don't even know you," she said, her voice steadier now. "How can I trust you?" "You don't have to trust me yet," Damon replied, a faint, almost sad smile touching his lips. "But trust that I'd rather die than let you leave this place in shame. Say yes, Elena. Let me stand with you." Her heart pounded, torn between fear and a reckless spark of hope. She thought of her father, of the courage he'd instilled in her, the way he'd always believed she could face anything. Maybe this was her chance to reclaim her strength, to rewrite this moment. She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving Damon's. "Yes," she said, the word ringing clear in the silent cathedral. The crowd erupted, a chaotic mix of gasps, cheers, and protests. Clara squeezed her hand, whispering, "Are you sure?" But Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. Damon stood, offering his hand, not to pull her up, but as a gesture of partnership. She placed her trembling hand in his, its warmth grounding her. The priest, flustered but recovering, stepped forward. "Well then, shall we proceed?" Damon's gaze remained on Elena, a silent vow in his eyes. "We shall," he said, and in that moment, Elena knew her life had changed forever. St. Patrick's Cathedral, which just minutes ago had been filled with whispers and chaos, now sank into tense silence. The priest's voice awkwardly repeated the wedding vows, sounding uncertain, as if he wasn't sure what he was doing. Elena Brooks sat in her wheelchair, her hand still held firmly by Damon Blackwood. The warmth of his strong palm, the only thing keeping her from feeling as though she were floating in a strange dream. The ivory wedding dress still hugged her figure, but it now felt heavy, a reminder of what had just occurred. Jason had abandoned her at the altar, and now a man she had never met stood beside her, declaring he would be her husband. Damon stood tall, broad-shouldered, and unyielding, his eyes scanning the crowd as an implicit warning. The murmurs gradually faded, though curious and suspicious glances lingered. Clara, Elena's best friend, stood nearby, arms tightly crossed, her expression wavering between worry and shock. "Elena," she whispered, "are you sure about this?" But Elena only nodded slightly, lips pressed together. She wasn't sure. How could she be when she'd just agreed to marry a stranger? But there was something in Damon's voice, in the way he spoke of her father, that made her feel this wasn't an entirely insane decision. The priest, after fumbling momentarily, continued the ceremony, his voice shaking as he read the vows. Elena listened, but her mind drifted back to Damon's words. "I owe your father a great deal." Her father, Thomas Brooks, a man with a gentle smile whose eyes always lit up when he spoke of kindness. He had passed away 5 years earlier, yet his memory remained vivid, guiding her through her darkest days. How had Damon known her father? And why had he appeared now, like a ghost from the past? When the priest asked for the rings, Damon pulled a simple silver band from his pocket, its surface gleaming softly under the cathedral lights. "I didn't have time to prepare," he whispered quietly, just enough for her to hear. "But it belonged to my mother. I hope you don't mind." Elena looked at the ring, her heart tightening, not because of its simplicity, but because of his gesture, a sincere act without any boastfulness. She shook her head slightly. "No, I don't mind." She had no ring to give him, but Damon only smiled faintly, a brief expression that nevertheless flustered her. "We'll take care of that later," he said, and the priest, clearly eager to conclude, declared them husband and wife. There was no kiss. Damon simply squeezed her hand gently, his eyes reassuring her that everything would be all right. The crowd applauded sparsely, some reluctantly, others driven by curiosity rather than joy. Elena felt Margaret Reynolds' gaze, Jason's mother, stabbing her from the front row. but she ignored it. She had chosen this path, wherever it led. As the ceremony concluded, Damon leaned down, his voice low. "We should leave. I'll get you out of here." Elena nodded, her heart pounding. Clara approached, hugging her tightly. "Call me immediately if you need anything, okay?" she whispered, eyes red-rimmed. Elena gave a weak smile. "I'll be okay, Clara. Thank you." Damon pushed her wheelchair down the aisle, the crowd parting before them. Some offered congratulations, but most just stared, as if they were characters in a strange play. When they reached the door, the afternoon sunlight of New York poured in, making her squint. A glossy black Rolls-Royce waited, the driver swiftly opening the door. Damon helped her into the car with surprising care, as though he'd done this hundreds of times. As the door closed, silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the soft hum of the engine. Elena faced Damon, now sitting opposite her in the spacious car. "You still haven't explained," she said, calm but firm. "How did you know my father? And why did you do all this?" Damon sighed, appearing uncertain for the first time. He looked out the window, his gaze distant, as if sifting through memories. 15 years ago, he began quietly, I wasn't the Damon Blackwood I am now. I was just a broke 20-year-old kid living in the slums of Brooklyn. One night I got hit by a car. A drunk driver struck me while I was walking. I nearly died, blood everywhere, and no one stopped to help. Elena listened, her breath slowing. She'd never heard this story, but Damon's tone carried a sincerity she couldn't doubt. "Your father, Dr. Thomas Brooks, happened to pass by," Damon continued. "He was on his way home after a night shift at the hospital. He could have ignored me, like everyone else, but he didn't. He administered first aid right there on the sidewalk, called an ambulance, and stayed at the hospital until he was sure I was stable. I had no insurance, no family, nothing. But he paid the hospital bills without asking for anything." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. That was exactly like her father, always putting others first, no matter how exhausted or busy he was. "My father never told me this," she said softly. Damon nodded, his gaze softening. "He wasn't the kind to boast. When I recovered, I sought him out to thank him. I told him I would repay the favor, no matter the cost. He just smiled, a smile I'm sure you inherited, and said, 'If you can, help my daughter if someday I'm no longer there for her.'" Those words tightened Elena's heart. She recalled her father holding her after her accident, comforting her when she cried over not being able to walk. "You're my fighter," he used to say. Now she realized he'd always worried about her future, even when he wouldn't be there. "I kept that promise close," Damon said quietly. "After your father died, I started watching over you, from afar, not interfering. I knew you were strong, Elena. I saw you graduate, build your career, live your life. I didn't want to disrupt that peace. But today," he paused, his fist clenched. "When I saw that bastard humiliate you in front of everyone, I couldn't just stand by." Elena stared at him, processing everything. Damon Blackwood, the man feared by the entire city, had quietly protected her because of a promise to her father. She didn't know how to feel, grateful, confused, or afraid. "So you married me," she said calmly, "to fulfill your promise." Damon tilted his head, his gaze sharp but not cold. "To protect you," he corrected. "Not just because of a promise, but because you didn't deserve to be treated like that. I don't expect you to love me, Elena. I just want you safe and for the world to see your worth." She pressed her lips together, struggling with her rising emotions. "And now what? We're married, yet I know nothing about you. I don't even know where we're going." Damon smiled gently, seeming more approachable than before. "You're coming to my home, Blackwood Manor. There, you can rest, think, and decide your next step. I won't force anything on you. It's a safe place for you, Elena, until you're ready." The car stopped at large iron gates, behind which stood an immense mansion hidden by trees. Elena peered through the window, her heart racing. A new chapter had begun, and although she didn't yet understand Damon Blackwood, she knew her father's promise had brought them together. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was her chance to rediscover herself. The sunset bathed the New York sky in red, with the final rays of daylight streaming through ancient oak trees, casting light on the massive iron gates of Blackwood Manor. Elena Brooks sat inside the Rolls-Royce, gripping the hem of her wedding dress, eyes fixed on the mansion ahead. The estate rose like a fortress, with cold gray stone walls, towering windows and domed roofs reminiscent of European castles. It was beautiful, but lonely, as if it reflected the man who had just become her husband less than an hour ago. Damon sat across from her, calm yet watchful. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said in his deep voice. "This will be your home for as long as you want." Elena gave a faint smile, though a storm of emotions churned inside her. Just hours ago, she had stood at the altar, heart shattered by Jason's betrayal. Now she was in a luxury car beside a man the city called intimidating. She still hadn't processed Damon's story about the promise he made to her father, about how he had silently watched over her all these years. It was touching, but also unsettling. Who was he really? And what was she to him? A duty, an obligation, or something else? The car stopped at the front steps. Damon got out first and opened the door for her. A middle-aged man in a black suit, clearly the butler, appeared with a polite smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm Henry, Mr. Damon's butler. It's an honor to serve you." Elena blushed, still unaccustomed to the name Mrs. Blackwood. "Thank you, Henry," she replied, her voice slightly shaky. Damon placed his hand on her wheelchair, silently seeking her consent. "I can help you," he said. Not a question, but a gentle offer. She nodded and he carefully wheeled her up a newly installed ramp beside the stairs. The thoughtfulness surprised her. Blackwood Manor clearly wasn't built with accessibility in mind. Yet this ramp looked new, as if built for her. Inside, the grand foyer was overwhelming with its soaring ceilings, glittering crystal chandelier, and polished marble floors. Classical paintings lined the walls, but the space felt cold, lacking the warmth of a true home. "It's very impressive," Elena said, searching for the right words. Damon chuckled softly, a rare sound that startled her. "I know it's a bit gloomy. I don't spend much time here. Work keeps me busy." He paused and looked at her. "But you can change anything. This is your home now." She shook her head, still feeling more like a guest than the lady of the house. "I'm not sure I'll stay long," she said honestly. "I appreciate this, truly, but I need time to process everything." Damon nodded, showing no sign of offense. "I understand. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk more clearly." He gestured to Henry, who promptly led her to a room on the ground floor. "This room has been prepared for you," Henry said. "It has all the amenities, and if you need anything, just call me." The room was spacious, with a large bed draped in silk sheets, a window overlooking the garden, and a small workspace. More importantly, it was designed for ease of movement. No steps, low door handles, and a remodeled bathroom with handrails. Elena looked around, feeling a mix of gratitude and skepticism. "He prepared all this in advance?" she asked Henry. The butler offered a discreet smile. "Mr. Damon is very detail-oriented, ma'am. He wanted you to feel comfortable." After Henry left, Elena sat alone, still in her wedding gown. She looked into the mirror and saw a stranger, red eyes, messy hair, but a glimmer of resilience. She thought of Damon, of how he had entered the church and declared he would marry her in front of hundreds. He said he wanted to protect her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was a burden, an obligation he bore for her father's sake. That night, sleep came slowly. She dreamed of her father, of the days he would push her wheelchair through the park, singing silly songs to make her laugh. When she woke, morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, and she knew she needed to face Damon and herself. The next morning, Elena met Damon in the dining room. A grand space with a wooden table long enough to seat 20, but only 2 chairs were set near each other. Damon wore a white dress shirt and slacks, sleeves rolled up, looking far less intimidating than the night before. A tray of food had been laid out, eggs, toast, and fragrant coffee. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said, pushing the tray toward her. "If you want something else, just tell Henry." "Thank you," Elena replied, clutching the coffee cup to hide her nerves. She took a breath and got straight to the point. "Mr. Blackwood—" "Call me Damon," he interrupted gently but firmly. "All right. Damon, She corrected herself, the name unfamiliar on her lips. I need to know what you expect from me. You said you wanted to protect me, but I'm not some helpless woman who needs saving. I've managed just fine before, and I can do it again. Damon set his cup down, his eyes serious. I don't think you're helpless, Elena. On the contrary, I admire your strength. What you've been through, the accident, your father's death, and yesterday, proves that. I didn't bring you here to save you. I brought you here to give you a safe place where you can decide your future without further pain. She studied him, searching for deceit, but saw only sincerity. And what do you get out of this? She asked, her tone sharper. You don't know me. Why sacrifice so much? Your reputation, your time, your life? Damon was silent for a moment, as if weighing his answer. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, he finally said. When your father saved me, I had nothing but anger and despair. He gave me a chance to live again. Now I have everything, money, power, but none of it means anything if I don't keep my promise to him. You're not a debt, Elena. You're the reason I believe I can do the right thing. His words left her speechless. She had never seen him that way before. A man marked by scars of the past, searching for meaning through gratitude. Yet she remained cautious. I'll stay, she said, but I have conditions. I want to keep my independence. I'll work, I'll pay rent if needed, and I don't want to be treated like some special guest just because of my wheelchair. Damon smiled, this time a genuine smile that softened his sharp features. Deal, but you're not paying rent. This is your home, not a hotel. He stood and gestured toward the window. If you want, I can have anything in the house remodeled to suit your needs. And if you want to work, I can connect you with some graphic design projects. But no pressure, Elena. You set the pace. She nodded, feeling both relieved and curious. Damon wasn't what she expected. Not arrogant or self-righteous. He respected her, and that made her want to understand him more. The following days at Blackwood Manor were a challenge. Elena explored the house, each grand room spacious but empty, as if Damon rarely lived there. She discovered a library with thousands of books, from classic novels to business texts, and a wildflower garden out back where she began spending more time. But she also noticed Damon's loneliness. He often worked late, only appearing at breakfast or when she happened upon him in the hallways. One afternoon, as Elena read in the library, Damon entered with a folder in hand. I found a few design projects that might suit you, he said, placing the folder on the table. If you are interested. She looked at him, surprised by his thoughtfulness. Thank you, she said, flipping through the pages. But you didn't have to do this. I can find work on my own. I know, he replied, taking a seat across from her. But I want to help, not because you need it, but because I believe you're good at it. He paused as if wanting to say more, but simply smiled. Just think about it. Elena nodded, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. Damon didn't push, didn't pity. He just opened doors, letting her walk through them. And for the first time since that fateful wedding day, she began to think that Blackwood Manor might not just be a refuge, but a place where she could find herself again. The first days at Blackwood Manor passed like a wordless symphony, peaceful, yet laced with uneasy undertones. Elena Brooks woke each morning in the large ground floor room, sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting golden hues on the polished wooden floor. Her wedding gown had been stored away, replaced by the simple yet comfortable clothes Henry had thoughtfully prepared. Soft jeans, cozy sweaters, all chosen for easy movement in her wheelchair. Yet despite the house being adapted for her, Elena still felt like a misplaced guest, not truly belonging. Blackwood Manor was a world of its own, lavish yet lonely. The grand chandelier and classical paintings in the main hall continued to overwhelm her, but the echoing silence unnerved her more. She spent her time in the library, leafing through old books, or in the back garden where wildflowers grew amid neatly kept grass. There, in nature's quiet company, she felt more herself, as if it were the only place that didn't judge her. Damon Blackwood, by contrast, was a fleeting presence. He left before dawn, busy with meetings at Blackwood Enterprises, and often returned only after nightfall. Their brief interactions, usually over breakfast, or on the rare evenings he stayed home, were short yet meaningful. Damon maintained a respectful distance, asking about her day, offering help with graphic design work, but never imposing. His attentiveness left Elena both grateful and confused. He didn't act like a husband, more like a silent guardian, dedicated yet difficult to grasp. One morning while Elena was having toast and tea, Damon walked in holding an iPad. "I found a project that might suit you," he said, sliding the device toward her. "A nonprofit organization needs a logo and promotional materials. I thought you might enjoy it." Elena flipped through the files, her heart lifting. The project matched her strengths: creative, meaningful, and not too demanding. "Thank you," she said, looking at him, "but you don't have to find work for me. I can manage on my own." Damon raised an eyebrow, a faint smile playing at his lips. "I know. I didn't do it because you need help. I did it because I believe you're good." He sat across from her, his gaze sharp but not overbearing. "Did you look at the other projects I gave you last week?" She nodded, slightly flushed. "Yes, I've started drafting some ideas, but—" She hesitated. "I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of you, Damon. You've already done too much." He tilted his head, serious. "Elena, you're not taking advantage of me. If I offer something, it's because I want to, not because I'm obligated. Just do what makes you happy. That's all I hope for." His words left her momentarily speechless. There was something in his voice, a blend of sincerity and quiet loneliness, that made her want to ask more about him, about the man behind the intimidating reputation. But she simply nodded and took another sip of tea to mask her thoughts. Their differences soon became the source of minor clashes. Elena, with her warm and sociable nature, wanted to make Blackwood Manor feel less like a museum. One afternoon, she asked Henry to place a vase of fresh flowers in the dining room. "Just to brighten the space," she said with a smile. Henry agreed, and that evening, a vivid bouquet of red carnations sat at the center of the table. When Damon walked in, his expression turned perplexed. "Who did this?" he asked, not angry, but clearly displeased. "I did," Elena replied, surprised. "I thought it would make the room feel more welcoming." He sat down, eyes fixed on the flowers as though they were foreign objects. "I'm not used to things like this," he said quietly. "This house doesn't need flowers. They just clutter everything." Elena frowned, feeling stung. "Clutter? Damon, it's just a vase. It's not hurting anyone." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "I didn't mean it like that. I just prefer things simple. This house is where I work. It's not for decorations." She pressed her lips together, frustration rising. "So you want me to live in a gray box? You said this was my home too. If I want it to feel like a real home, don't I have the right to make changes?" Damon looked at her, torn between irritation and something like amusement. "Fine," he said at last, voice softer. "Do what you want, but don't expect me to like it." She smirked, refusing to back down. "I don't need you to like it. I just need you to live with it." Henry, standing in the corner, discreetly hid a smile. Such exchanges became part of daily life at Blackwood Manor. Elena, with her determined spirit, wasn't afraid to challenge Damon. She suggested opening the curtains to let in more light, hanging colorful art in the halls, even persuading Henry to serve cozier meals instead of formal fare. Damon, though initially resistant, began to yield, albeit with frequent grumbling. But Elena noticed that despite the complaints, he never truly seemed angry. Perhaps, she thought, he even enjoyed their back and forth. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. Elena was navigating the long ground floor hallway toward the library when her wheelchair suddenly caught on a seam between two rugs. One wheel jammed, and despite her efforts, wouldn't budge. She sighed, irritated. Moments like these, though rare, reminded her of her limitations. She looked around, hoping Henry was nearby, but the hall was empty. "Damn it," she muttered, leaning down to inspect the wheel. Rain tapped steadily on the windows, adding to the gloom. She was struggling with the jammed wheel when she heard footsteps. "Elena!" Damon's voice rang out, low but full of concern. He appeared at the end of the hallway, shirt damp from the rain. "What happened?" She flushed, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of weakness. "Nothing. she replied quickly. My wheelchair's stuck. I can handle it. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. Without a word, he knelt beside her and examined the wheel with surprising focus. This gap shouldn't be here, he muttered, as if blaming himself. He pulled the rug back and gently lifted the wheel, freeing it within seconds. Elena looked at him, heart racing. Thank you, she said softly. I'm not used to asking for help. Damon stood and wiped his hands on his shirt, his gaze unusually tender. You don't have to do everything alone, Elena. Not here. He paused as though wanting to say more, then simply asked, Where were you headed? I'll push you. She hesitated, then nodded. The library. He gripped the wheelchair handles and wheeled her down the hall with a care that surprised her. When they reached the library, he stopped at her favorite bookshelf. What do you like to read? He asked, genuinely curious. She smiled, feeling at ease with him for the first time. Romance novels, sometimes poetry. You? He shrugged, a rare smile appearing. Business books. Boring, I know. But his eyes lit up as if he too was enjoying the moment. They talked for a while, about books, about little things, and Elena realized she no longer found him intimidating. Damon, for all his reserve, carried a sincerity she couldn't ignore. When he left to return to work, she watched him go, a warm feeling blooming in her chest. Maybe Blackwood Manor wasn't just a sanctuary. Maybe it was the beginning of understanding between her and Damon. The rain had stopped, but droplets still clung to the leaves in the Blackwood Manor garden, glistening under the moonlight. Elena Brooks sat in the library, a book open in her lap but unread. Her thoughts lingered on the moment earlier that day, when Damon Blackwood, with hands both strong and gentle, had freed her jammed wheelchair and pushed her to the library with unexpected tenderness. His rare smile and the light in his eyes as they talked about books made her feel he was no longer the fearsome man everyone in the city whispered about. And yet she still didn't fully understand him, which left her heart caught between curiosity and caution. Life at Blackwood Manor had become more comfortable. Elena's small changes, a vase of flowers in the dining room, brighter curtains, the scent of Henry's baked goods, had softened the mansion's cold edges. Damon, though still grumbling, no longer resisted. She began working on the logo design project he'd introduced, and the hours she spent sketching brought a sense of freedom she hadn't felt since her wedding day. But each time she caught Damon's gaze, she wondered, what did he truly want from her? A companion? Or just a way to repay a promise to her father? One late evening, while Elena was in the garden enjoying the crisp air after the rain, she heard footsteps on the gravel path. Damon appeared, his black coat draped over one shoulder, hair tousled by the wind. I didn't expect to find you out here, he said, his voice deep but not cold. It's late. Aren't you cold? Elena smiled and pulled her sweater tighter. I like the air out here. It clears my head. She gestured to the wildflowers nearby. You know, these flowers are stronger than they look. They grow without anyone taking care of them. Damon sat on the stone bench beside her, his eyes following the flowers. Like you, he said quietly but firmly. Strong, even when the world hasn't always been kind to you. His words caught her off guard, and her cheeks warmed. I don't know if I'm that strong, she replied, glancing down at her hands. Some days I just wanted to disappear, especially after what happened with Jason. Damon tilted his head, his gaze sharp but soft. He didn't deserve you, Elena. But I understand that feeling, the urge to run from everything. He paused as if wrestling with his thoughts. I felt that way once, a long time ago. She looked at him, intrigued. You, the head of Blackwood Enterprises, the man everyone fears? I can't imagine you ever wanting to run. He let out a dry chuckle, not bitter but hollow. I wasn't always this person. When I was a kid, life wasn't easy. My mother left when I was 5, and I was raised by a father who drank too much. He didn't hit me, but he didn't care either. I grew up in a rundown apartment, living off stale bread and learning to defend myself by the time I was 10. Elena listened, her heart aching. She had never pictured Damon as a child, a lonely, neglected boy. So how did you become this? She asked, gesturing toward the grand estate. Willpower, he answered, gaze distant. And a bit of luck. I worked like hell, studied everything I could, and built Blackwood Enterprises from nothing. But I never forgot those days. Every time I think I've made it, I remember the hunger, the cold. It keeps me sharp, but it also makes me distant. She nodded, beginning to understand his guarded nature. I had days like that too, she said softly. After the accident, when I realized I'd never walk again, I was furious. I hated myself. I hated the world. My father pulled me out of that darkness. He told me I didn't need legs to fly, just a heart and a mind. Damon looked at her, admiration lighting his face. He was right. You have flown, Elena. You graduated, built a career, faced that coward at the altar, and didn't fall apart. I've never met anyone as strong as you. His words touched her, but she shook her head. I'm not always strong. Some days I just want to be normal, to walk, to run, or even just stand without help. Little things most people take for granted, like stairs or a heavy door, can make me feel useless. Damon was silent, his eyes thoughtful. I never considered that, he admitted. I see you move through this place, doing everything, and I thought you had it all under control. I didn't realize how hard it really was. She gave a sad smile. I've learned to hide it. I don't want people to see me struggle, but sometimes, like when the wheelchair got stuck, I can't pretend. He leaned closer, his voice low but firm. You don't have to pretend with me, Elena. If you need help, just ask. Not because I think you're weak, but because I want to be there for you. His words reached a deep place in her heart. She looked at him, and for the first time she didn't see a guardian or a benefactor, but a man with his own scars trying to connect. Thank you, she said, her voice tight with emotion. And I'm sorry for what you went through. No one should grow up like that. Damon shrugged, but his eyes softened. It made me who I am, and without those days I wouldn't have met your father. Without him, I wouldn't be here, with you. The words made her heart pound. She wasn't sure what he meant exactly, but there was a warmth in his voice that made her feel she was more than just a promise. They sat in silence for a while, under the moonlight, sharing a peace that didn't need words. For the first time, Elena felt that Blackwood Manor wasn't just a temporary refuge. It was becoming a place she could belong. In the days that followed, their relationship shifted. Damon began staying home more often, joining Elena in the library or the garden. They talked about everything, from books and music to the dreams they once had. Elena told him about her wish to open her own design studio. Damon, though rarely opening up, admitted he once dreamed of being an architect before business swept him away. One evening, as they sat in the living room with the fireplace crackling, Elena asked something that had lingered in her mind. Damon, she began hesitantly, have you ever been in love? He looked at her, briefly surprised. Love? He echoed as if the word were foreign. No, never. I never had the time or the heart for it. After my mother, I learned not to believe in it. He paused, staring into the fire. What about you? Before that bastard, was there anyone? She shook her head, giving a wistful smile. Number Jason was the first person I thought I loved, but now I realize it wasn't love. It was hope. I wanted to believe someone could love me, even like this. Damon turned to her, his gaze intense. Someone will love you, Elena, not in spite of who you are, but because of it. You deserve that. His words brought tears to her eyes. She wanted to speak, but only nodded, afraid her voice would break. They kept talking, sharing old wounds and forgotten dreams. And in the flickering firelight, Elena felt something stir, something beyond gratitude or friendship. It was love, fragile but real. As the night deepened, Damon stood and offered his hand to guide her back to her room. Good night, Elena, he said softly. She held his hand a second longer than necessary and smiled. Good night, Damon. As the door closed behind her, Elena knew her heart had begun to open, and whatever the future held, she was no longer afraid. Morning sunlight filtered through the oak trees, casting soft light over the Blackwood Manor garden, where Elena Brooks sat in her wheelchair, a digital drawing pad resting on her lap. She was finalizing the logo for the nonprofit Damon had referred her to, sharp lines forming under her steady fingers. 2 months at Blackwood Manor had changed her. The pain from Jason's betrayal was now a faint scar, and she found joy in her work, in late-night conversations with Damon, and in the freedom she was slowly reclaiming. But what made her heart race wasn't the art or the garden. It was Damon. Once a mystery, he had become an irreplaceable part of her life. Their late-night talks in the library, the quiet ways he helped adjust her wheelchair or brought her coffee during her late work sessions. These gestures wove a connection she didn't dare name. She sensed a change in him too. His gaze softer, his smiles more frequent, his presence no longer daunting but warm, like the hearth on a winter night. And yet she still wondered, did he feel the same, or was she just a promise he intended to keep? One morning, while Elena was in the living room admiring a colorful watercolor painting she had found in the estate's storage and hung herself, the doorbell rang. Henry, the butler, answered, and the familiar voice that followed made her chest tighten. "I need to see Elena," the voice said, deep but trembling. "Please, let me in." Jason. Elena's heart clenched. She hadn't heard from him since the day he left her at the altar, and now his voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. She inhaled deeply, adjusted her wheelchair, and moved toward the grand foyer. "Henry," she called, her voice steady but firm. "Let him in." Jason entered, still handsome in his gray suit, though his eyes lacked their usual confidence. His hair was disheveled, and dark circles beneath his eyes hinted at sleepless nights. "Elena," he said hoarsely, "thank you for seeing me." She looked at him, the embers of old anger flaring. "What do you want, Jason?" she asked coldly. "You made yourself clear at the church." Jason stepped forward, hand half raised as if to reach for her, but dropped it when he saw her eyes. "I was wrong," he said, voice filled with regret. "I panicked, Elena. I didn't think I could handle everything, but I've thought a lot since then. I realized I love you, and I want to make it right." His words stunned her, not with emotion, but with disbelief. "Love me?" she repeated, sarcasm slipping into her tone. "You loved me so much you humiliated me in front of hundreds and called me a burden? What do you want now, Jason? Damage control? Or just relief from guilt?" Jason flushed but stood his ground. "I know I don't deserve it, but I've changed. I talked to my mother. She was wrong to pressure me. I want us to start over. You don't belong here, Elena. Not with him." Her eyes narrowed, fury bubbling. "Him? You mean Damon? The man who stood by me when you ran? You have no right to judge him or me." Before Jason could respond, a cold voice echoed from the entrance. "She's right." Damon stepped into the foyer, a storm cloaked in human form. His eyes locked on Jason, razor sharp, and the room thickened with tension. "You have some nerve showing up here after what you did." Jason straightened, trying to stay calm. "This is between Elena and me, Blackwood. You don't belong in this." Damon moved forward, each step thudding against the marble floor like a warning. "Don't belong?" he growled, voice low and lethal. "You left her. You humiliated her in front of the world, and now you think you can just waltz back in like you have some right? Elena is my wife. You have no place here." Elena's heart pounded as Damon stood protectively before her. There was no mistaking the possessiveness in his voice, the fire in his eyes. For the first time she understood. Damon didn't protect her out of duty. His feelings ran deeper, fiercer, and the realization made her tremble. Jason let out a shaky laugh. "Your wife? That sham of a marriage to save her reputation? Everyone knows you did it out of pity, Blackwood. Elena deserves someone who actually loves her, not some cold-hearted bastard like you." The insult was gasoline on fire. Damon's fists clenched, and for a moment, Elena feared he might strike. But instead, he turned to her, his gaze burning but gentle. "Elena," he said, voice low but clear, "you tell me what you want. If you want him to stay, he stays. But if you want him gone, just say the word." She looked from Damon to Jason. The difference between the two men had never been starker. Jason, with his belated apologies and murky motives, evoked only contempt. But Damon, the man who shielded her when she was most vulnerable, who had spent 2 months offering respect and quiet strength, was the one she trusted. And beyond that, she realized he was the one she loved. "Jason," she said, her voice unwavering, "you had your chance. You threw it away. I don't want to hear another word from you. Leave and don't come back." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but Damon stepped forward, eyes like steel. "You heard her," he said, voice dangerous. "Get out of my house or I'll make sure you regret it." Jason backed away, his face pale. "You'll regret this, Elena," he muttered, but the threat rang hollow. He turned and left quickly, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Henry, who had remained quietly in the corner, gently closed the door. Elena looked at Damon, her heart still racing. He turned to her, concern now replacing fire in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling to meet her gaze. She nodded, tears suddenly stinging her eyes. "I just didn't expect him to come back," she whispered, "and I didn't expect you to protect me like that." Damon reached out, his fingers warm against hers. "I'll always protect you, Elena," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not because of some promise, because I can't stand the thought of you being hurt. Not ever again." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw the truth she had tried to ignore. Damon didn't just care. He loved her, even if he hadn't said it. And she loved him too, deeper than she had realized. "Damon," she said, voice trembling, "I don't know where this is going, but I want to stay with you." He smiled, truly smiled, and the harsh lines of his face softened. "Then stay," he said, gently squeezing her hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." They sat there in the grand hall of Blackwood Manor, sunlight streaming through the windows, and for the first time, Elena felt she had found home, not within stone walls, but in the heart of the man beside her. The gentle morning light spilled through the grand windows of Blackwood Manor, falling on stone walls that had grown warmer thanks to Elena Brooks' subtle touches. Pale blue curtains, vases of carnations in the dining room, and her rare laughter had softened the house's chill. After last week's confrontation with Jason, Elena felt a new certainty in her heart. Damon Blackwood was not just the man who had protected her from public humiliation. He was the man she loved, though she hadn't dared say it aloud. His jealousy and fierce protectiveness had confirmed what she hoped. He felt something for her too, even if he hadn't said the words. But that morning, as Elena wheeled through the first-floor hallway toward the library to continue her design project, a strange unease crept over her. Damon had left early, as usual, but he'd left a note on the breakfast table. "Urgent meeting. Be back soon. Call me if you need anything." D short, but thoughtful enough to make her smile. She brushed her fingers over the paper, wondering when she'd find the courage to tell him she wanted this relationship to be real. Not just protective, but romantic. As she neared the library, low voices drifted from Damon's office, the door slightly ajar. His voice, usually calm and commanding, now carried a tension she rarely heard. "I don't want any mistakes, Marcus," he said sharply. "She can't know. Not yet." Elena froze, heart pounding. Marcus, Damon's assistant, replied, voice low but clear. "I understand, sir, but you can't keep this hidden forever. If she finds out the real reason you married her, she'll never forgive you." The words pierced Elena like a blade. She gripped her wheelchair's armrests, breath-catching. The real reason? She leaned closer, against every instinct to flee. She had to know. "It was a promise to Thomas Brooks," Damon continued, voice heavier. "I owe him my life. Marrying Elena was how I could repay him, to protect her, like he asked. I can't let her think this is anything else. It would complicate everything." Marcus sighed. "But sir, people are talking. They think you married her out of pity or to prove something. If she hears that—" "Enough," Damon cut in, his voice icy. "I don't care what people think. I did this for Thomas, and I'll keep doing it until she's safe. Make sure this doesn't get out." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She backed away slowly, wheels silent on the polished floor, her chest aching. All those moments she'd cherished, the late-night talks, his gentleness, the way he'd defended her against Jason, Had they only been part of a promise? Had he married her not out of love, but out of a debt to her father? She turned and wheeled quickly back to her room, tears spilling no matter how hard she tried to hold them in. Inside, she shut the door and let her breath shudder. Around her, everything reminded her of Damon. Her silk-covered bed, the desk where she sketched, the garden beyond the window. But now it all felt like a cage. She had believed she belonged here. But if his feelings were duty and not love, she couldn't stay. She took out a sheet of paper, hands trembling as she wrote, "Dear Damon, thank you for saving me from the shame of that wedding day, for giving me a safe place, and for keeping your promise to my father. I will always be grateful for your kindness, but I cannot stay knowing I'm just a responsibility to you. I'm sorry if I've disrupted your life. I hope you find happiness, just as I thought I had found it here. Elena." She folded the letter, placed it on the desk, and began to pack. She didn't have much, just a few clothes, her laptop, and a photo of her with her father. She tucked them into a small bag and called Clara. "Clara," she whispered when her friend picked up, "I need you to come get me, right now." Clara, surprised, didn't question her. "I'm on my way. Where are you?" "Blackwood Manor," Elena replied, voice cracking. "Please hurry." While she waited, Elena glanced around the room one last time. She remembered Damon wheeling her through the halls, his rare laugh when she teased him about business books. But it was all a mirage now. She wiped her tears, adjusted her wheelchair, and rolled into the main hall. Henry, dusting the foyer, turned, startled by her bag. "Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, concerned. "Where are you going?" Elena offered a sad smile. "I have to leave, Henry. Thank you for taking such good care of me." She handed him the letter. "Please give this to Damon when he returns." Henry took it, his expression puzzled. "But ma'am—" "Please," she interrupted gently but firmly, "don't say anything until I'm gone." He gave a reluctant nod, and Elena moved toward the door. Clara arrived moments later in her blue SUV. She helped Elena into the car, saying nothing until they had passed the manor's gates. "Elena," Clara finally said, "what happened? I thought you were happy with Damon." Elena turned away, watching the trees blur past. "I thought so too," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was wrong. He doesn't love me, Clara. He's just keeping a promise to my father." Clara frowned but didn't press her. "Where to now?" "My apartment," Elena replied. "I need to start over." As they drove into the city, Elena felt a hollow ache inside her. She had believed Blackwood Manor was home, that Damon was someone she could trust, but now she only had herself. And though the pain was crushing, she knew she was strong enough to go on. She just hoped Damon wouldn't come after her, because if he did, she wasn't sure she could keep her heart intact. Blackwood Manor had never felt so silent. When Damon Blackwood stepped into the grand hall in the late afternoon, sunlight fading through the windows, the house lacked the life Elena Brooks had brought to it. No soft laughter in the library, no carnations on the dining table, no trace of her in the garden. He frowned, unease creeping in. She was usually here at this hour, working or reading. "Elena," he called, his voice echoing through the empty space. Henry, the butler, appeared from the corner, worry etched on his face. "Sir," he said hesitantly, "Mrs. Blackwood has left." He held out a letter, his hand trembling. "She left this." Damon took the letter, his chest tightening. He opened it, scanning Elena's handwriting. Each word cut deep. "Thank you for everything. I cannot stay, knowing I'm just a responsibility. I'm sorry if I disrupted your life." He clenched the paper, breath heavy. "When did she leave?" he asked hoarsely. "This morning, sir," Henry replied. "She asked me not to say anything until she was gone. I'm sorry." Damon didn't hear the rest. He turned, grabbed his phone, and called Marcus. "Find Elena," he ordered, voice sharp with rising panic. "Check her apartment, her friends' homes, everywhere she might go. Now." Hanging up, he ran to his car, mind reeling. How could she think she was a burden? How had he let her believe that? He drove like a madman through the streets of New York, checking her old apartment first. Locked. No sign of her. He called Clara, Elena's best friend, but she refused to say anything. "She needs time, Damon. Let her be. Desperation swelled, but he didn't give up. He remembered Elena's stories about her father, about the afternoons she'd spend by his grave for comfort. St. John's Cemetery, where Thomas Brooks was buried, that's where she'd be. When Damon arrived, the sky had dimmed to twilight, wind sweeping through the rows of headstones. He hurried along the narrow paths, eyes searching. Then he saw her, Elena, in her wheelchair, head bowed before a simple grave. A bouquet of white daisies lay beside her, petals quivering in the breeze. She looked small, fragile, and Damon's heart ached at the pain she must be feeling. "Elena," he called, his voice low and raw as he approached. She startled, turning to face him, her eyes red but guarded. "Damon? How did you find me?" He dropped to his knees before her, not caring about the dirt. "I'll always find you," he said, voice trembling. "Elena, why did you leave? Why would you ever think you were a burden?" She pressed her lips together, tears slipping free. "I heard you with Marcus," she whispered. "You said you married me because of my father, because of a promise. I don't want to be someone's debt, Damon. I love you, and I can't stay if you don't feel the same." Her words stunned him. She loved him, but the joy was crushed by the realization that he had hurt her. "Elena," he said, gripping her hands, his own shaking, "you misunderstood. Yes, I married you because of a promise, at first, but that's not why I stayed. That's not why I can't live without you." She stared at him, caught between doubt and hope. "Then why?" she asked, her voice breaking. Damon took a deep breath, letting his heart speak. "I love you, Elena," he said clearly. "I don't know exactly when it started. Maybe when you argued with me about the flowers, or when you smiled in the library, or when you stood up to that bastard with such strength. But I love you, not because of your father, because you're you. Brilliant, brave, beautiful." Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks, but she shook her head. "How do I know this isn't just another promise you're trying to keep?" He tightened his hold on her hands, his gaze burning into hers. "Because I can't breathe without you. When I read your letter, it felt like losing everything. I'm not making a promise to anyone, Elena. I'm begging you. Stay with me. Not because of your father, but because I need you." She looked at him, heart pounding. There was something in his eyes, honesty, vulnerability, that she couldn't deny. She remembered the moments they'd shared, how he always respected her, how he stood up for her, and she knew deep down he meant every word. "Damon," she whispered, lifting a hand to his cheek, "I believe you." He exhaled, relief flooding his face. He pulled her into his arms, carefully but tightly, as if afraid she'd vanish again. "I won't let you go," he whispered into her hair. "Not ever." She leaned into him, her tears soaking into his coat, but this time they were tears of joy. Beneath the setting sun, beside her father's grave, Elena felt the pain fade. She had found love, and this time it was real. May sunlight streamed softly through the stained glass windows of a small church just outside New York, painting the space in hues of gold and blue. Unlike the grand St. Patrick's Cathedral, where Elena Brooks had once faced heartbreak and public humiliation, this church was cozy and intimate, with simple wooden pews and the faint scent of lavender in the air. Today, Elena sat in her wheelchair at the center aisle, wearing a simple white gown that hugged her frame, her chestnut hair falling loosely around her shoulders, adorned with a delicate floral crown. She smiled, heart light and full. This wasn't a wedding to salvage dignity. This was a wedding for love. Damon Blackwood stood at the altar, his tailored black suit accentuating his tall frame. But it was his eyes, soft, blazing, that never left Elena. No longer the intimidating figure of New York's elite, he was now a groom ready to give everything to the woman he loved. Friends and family filled the pews. Clara, Elena's best friend, dabbed her eyes and whispered to Henry, the Blackwood Manor butler, that she had never seen Elena so happy. Marcus, Damon's assistant, watched with a quiet smile, as if relieved his boss had finally found peace. As the minister began the ceremony, emotion surged through Elena. Months ago, she had thought she would never stand or even sit at the altar again. But Damon had changed everything. He had not only restored her dignity, but given her a love she'd never dared to dream of. She glanced at him, remembering that moment in the cemetery when he knelt before her and confessed his love with a sincerity that melted every doubt. From then on, they had stayed together, building a relationship grounded in trust and understanding. Elena, the minister said warmly, do you take Damon to be your husband, to love and cherish him in all circumstances, until death do you part? She looked at Damon, his gaze enveloping her. I do, she said clearly, her voice echoing in the church. Clara clapped, drawing light laughter from the crowd. Damon, the minister continued, do you take Elena to be your wife, to love and protect her through any challenge? Damon held Elena's hand, gently squeezing her fingers. I do, he said, his deep voice full of emotion, and I'd like to add something. He turned to her, his eyes never wavering. Elena, you changed my life. I once believed I couldn't love, that I didn't deserve happiness. But you taught me that love isn't pity or duty. It's strength, hope, and the home I found in you. I vow to stand by your side, not just today, but always. Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks, but she smiled, her heart overflowing. The guests applauded, some wiping their own eyes. Clara whispered to Henry, he really knows how to make people cry. The minister smiled and pronounced them husband and wife. Damon leaned down, gently kissing Elena, a kiss both tender and profound, a silent vow. Applause rang out as they rolled down the aisle, Elena feeling like she was flying, not with her legs but with Damon's love. After the ceremony, the reception took place in the garden of Blackwood Manor, the same garden where Elena had once sat beneath moonlight with Damon. Tables were adorned with lavender and lanterns, glowing warmly as twilight settled in. Clara stood to toast. To Elena, the strongest woman I know, and to Damon, who proved even the coldest hearts can melt, may your happiness last forever. Laughter and clinking glasses followed. Elena squeezed Damon's hand under the table, feeling his warmth. Do you regret it? She whispered teasingly. Marrying someone who argues with you about flower arrangements? He chuckled, eyes gleaming. Not for a second, he said, kissing her forehead. But you still can't put flowers in my office. She laughed, leaning into him. As a gentle ballad played, Damon stood and extended his hand. Dance with me? He asked. She raised an eyebrow, smiling. I'm not sure my wheelchair knows how to waltz. But he just grinned and wheeled her into the center of the patio, guiding her chair gracefully to the rhythm. Guests clapped, and Elena laughed aloud, happiness bubbling through her. As night fell, they sat together beneath the stars. Thank you, Elena said softly, for giving me a new beginning. Damon wrapped his arms around her, whispering, Thank you for giving me a whole life.